Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today will be the first video in my 1805 Napoleonic campaign series. The early period of this conflict fascinates me, from the colourful uniforms, the interesting variety of generals and the endless list of what-ifs. I'm not going to cover the history of this campaign or what led up to it. If you're interested in that, there are plenty of videos out there on YouTube. I even cover it briefly in my Battle of Austerlitz video. We're going to get straight into the action with the War of the Third Coalition. To start the campaign, I've come up with 4 different plans for the Austrian army. From the historical plan to a more defensive setup towards the Danube. With a roll of D20, Mack will now be retreating towards Munich with a defensive line north to Landshut and await reinforcement from the Russian army. The French plan, on the other hand, remains as it did historically, with Murat's cavalry and Lanné's corps pressing the Austrians in the south, while the rest of Napoleon's army envelops Mack from the north. With a good roll on the reaction table, Mack sends orders to his columns to retreat towards Munich. The initial French advance is slow as the roads become muddy after heavy rain along the Danube. In early October, Murat's cavalry catch up to the Austrians and engage in small skirmishes with Schwarzenberg's cavalry column. Mack, surprised by the speed of the French, orders all of his columns, bar Keimer's advance guard, to concentrate at Munich, hoping to find a strong position to oppose the French. The 5th column under Affenberg detaches a division to guard the bridges between Munich and Keimer's position at Landshut. But this division proves ineffective as Soult's whole corps of 35,000 troops force a crossing on the 14th of October. A day later, Marmont's Bavarian corps attempts to cross at Landshut, but is forced back by the stoic defence of Keimer's advance guard. Meanwhile, Napoleon, eager to draw the Austrian army to battle, orders his corps to concentrate on Munich. The Austrian army deploys for battle just across the river Isar, with French columns becoming visible in the early hours of October the 16th. General Mack sets up his army to defend 3 minor river crossings. The first, on his left flank, covered by Werneck's 3rd column, consists of 3 infantry brigades, 2,500 cavalry and around 50 guns in support. In the centre, which Mack believes is the most crucial of the 3 bridges, Ruysch's large 2nd column with 17,000 infantry, 2,000 cavalry and 40 guns. And the 3rd and final bridge occupied by Archduke Ferdinand and his 1st column, with 4 infantry brigades, 24 guns and 2,000 light cavalry. The rest of Mack's army is deployed in 2 main positions. Jellick's 4th column of 15,000 men occupies the high ground in the centre of the battlefield, a plateau flanked by forests and protected to the front by a stream. And the 2nd position, harbouring the Austrian line of retreat, is guarded by 9,000 men of Affenberg's column. And finally, to his rear, Schwarzenberg's cavalry column of 8,000 horse and 48 guns. Some of you may have noticed another Austrian column appear from the southeast on the campaign map. This is Archduke John's Army of Tyrol, which marched to support Mack's army. The Austrian general was informed that John's army would be arriving in the late afternoon of October the 13th, but with the Archduke delayed by weather and poor planning, he will actually arrive a day later around noon. Overall, Mack's army is 73,000 strong, including 13,000 cavalry and 216 guns. This number does not include John's Army of Tyrol, which is around 30,000 men and still en route to the battlefield. Opposing him, Napoleon's army begins with just Lanné and Ney's corps on the battlefield. The former on the Austrian left with 15,000 infantry, 3,000 cavalry and 48 guns will be assaulting the 1st bridge, while the latter, Ney, is tasked with attacking the main bridge in the centre. He has 22,000 troops under his command, also including 3,000 cavalry and 48 guns. Arriving about 30 minutes to an hour later is Davout's 3rd Corps, ordered to attack the 3rd and final bridge. His force consists of 24,000 men with 2,000 dragoons and also 72 guns in support. The remainder of the French army, Murat's cavalry reserve of 9,600 horse and the Imperial Guard will be arriving just behind Lanné's corps in the northwest. Napoleon's initial force numbers around 78,000 men, with just under 20,000 of those being cavalry, and also supported by 240 guns. Soult's corps, which crossed the river further north, is still marching to the battlefield. Now the Austrians are aware of this threat, but have underestimated the speed in which the marshal's men would reach the field. Soult is expected to arrive at around 4 p.m, but Mack believes it will be much later in the evening. The battle begins in the morning hours, as French columns begin to form up for battle. The first shots are fired just after 7:30, as Lannes orders Oudinot to take the first bridge. Under heavy artillery fire, he forms his 2 grenadier brigades to march on the Austrian position. To Lannes' surprise, the crossing goes smoothly as elite French infantry begin forming into lines on the opposing side of the river. It doesn't take Oudinot's men long before they begin return firing on the Austrian line infantry opposing them. Meanwhile, at 8 a.m, Ney begins his attack further east, as his men begin trading volleys over the river. But the French initially take heavy losses, as 40 Austrian guns rain down fire from the high ground. To the west, Oudinot's lightning attack succeeds, as his grenadiers force the Austrians to pull back and reform, allowing the remainder of his division to cross unchallenged. Werneck, in charge of defending this position, doesn't attempt to counterattack, instead ordering his column to withdraw to a more defensive position behind the stream. Lannes, one of Napoleon's most able subordinates, leaps on this opportunity, ordering Oudinot to press the attack while Chousset's division crosses to support him. In response, Werneck orders some 1,000 dragoons to charge the French grenadiers in an attempt to disorganise and delay this attack. But this is unsuccessful, and they are forced to fall back to friendly lines. Chousset's division, now across the river, pushes south to capture a town left undefended on the Austrian left. Multiple squadrons of Uhlans from the Austrian 3rd Column attempt to run down some French battalions, but they hastily form squares and repel them. Cannon fire can now be heard all across the battlefield, as Davout begins his attack on the 3rd and final bridge. The Austrians repel the initial assault, with both sides taking heavy losses. At around 10 a.m, Reach's column in the centre begins falling back on Mack's orders. Though they succeeded in stopping Ney's corps crossing the bridge, but with Ney's corps crossing the river to the east, Mack is now worried that his centre might be outflanked. Mack also sends orders to Ferdinand's column on the far right to fall back to the Austrian flank, but this order is lost in the fire of battle. Ferdinand has no intention to retreat. His troops have fought valiantly and inflicted heavy losses on Davout's men. His column holds on till midday, when Ferdinand finally receives Mack's orders. The Archduke orders his cavalry to strain his withdrawal, but Davout, having suffered major losses, makes no attempt to pursue. The battle now enters a lull, with only minor combat taking place. This new map shows the positions for the armies in the afternoon. The Austrians have a strong defensive line across the high ground and their line of retreat. Napoleon orders Davout to redeploy his corps tighter to Ney's force in the centre. This is mostly to make room for Soult's corps arriving within the hour. On receiving word from Soult's aide-de-camp, Napoleon comes up with a new plan of attack. Davout will begin his assault on the town, with Soult's corps supporting to the east. About 30 minutes later, Ney will begin his attack on the main Austrian position, followed by Lannes hitting the flank. These attacks are mainly to pin the Austrians in place, while Davout and Soult overrun the Austrian right flank. Davout begins forming his 3 divisions into an attack formation. In the background, a division of light cavalry from Murat's reserve moved to bolster his exposed flank. At 4 p.m, the first units from Soult's 4th Corps enter the battlefield. With Soult's arrival, Davout gives the order to attack. His divisions surge forward. Austrians of the 1st and 5th Column look on as this mass of French infantry begin marching on their position. Can they hold out until nightfall? Ferdinand expands his line, moving Jaegers into the woods on his right flank to hopefully delay Soult's advance. Meanwhile, at 5:30, Ney's column begin their upward march on the Austrian centre, followed by Lanné's corps in the west. Smoke now engulfs the battlefield as fighting happens across the line. While Ney's attacks in the centre stall, Davout has some success, forcing the Austrians out of the town and then repelling a determined Austrian counterattack. Saint-Hilaire, leading the French defence, is wounded, but it doesn't prove fatal. Ferdinand's delaying tactics work in slowing down Fourth Corps' advance, but Davout's men prove a bigger issue for the Austrians as they repeatedly push the Austrian infantry back. The centre shows more promise to the Austrians as Ney launches repeated attacks on the plateau with minimal gains. Werneck, defending the Austrian left flank, is wounded 3 times as he leads forward Austrian battalions at Lanné's corps. With darkness now covering the battlefield, the French attacks begin to dwindle. The Austrian army has held on, but with its line of retreat under threat, Mack orders his army to retreat under the cover of darkness. The Battle of Munich is over, and has ended as a minor tactical victory for the French army, but not decisive victory Napoleon requires. With the Russian army approaching and the Prussians on the verge of joining the Third Coalition, Napoleon needs to strike before the end of 1805. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this first episode in my 1805 campaign series. I hope to keep this going. Feel free to comment any questions or suggestions in the comments and I'll try and get back to you. Hopefully see you in the next one.